Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams. Today we're going to talk about the big three, moose, elk, and bighorn sheep. Jeb, when is the application deadline and how can you apply?
Sounds good, Mike. Yeah, the application deadline is March 27th this year, and there's two different ways folks can apply. The most common way is applying online. We still do have the phone option available if people aren't as comfortable applying online. So that option does still exist to apply on the phone. But what we've been seeing here the last couple of years, obviously the majority of people are applying online, and that is probably the preferred method.
Well, let's start out by talking about elk, Jeb. More licenses this year?
Yeah, more licenses this year. Good opportunities for sportsmen. We're seeing the elk population in North Dakota really kind of growing in all areas of the state. So we're seeing some slight increases going on in pretty much all areas of our state with our elk units. So 70 more licenses this year than last year for a total of 478 licenses.
Okay, something we recently did is we collared some elk out west.
Yeah, very interesting project. And one of the things out in the western part of the state, we've just seen a lot of changes with elk in the last 10 years or so, going back to the herd reduction in Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and then still having some elk on the outside of the park, obviously, in different areas of the western part of the state that we're seeing some small little groups that were born outside of the park. And then the big question was going to be, are these elk still going to be dependent on the south unit of the park? Lots of different questions. And as an agency, it is our responsibility to know as much as we can, and always trying to know more about everything we do. And this is one of the ways we're doing that in the western part of the state with elk.
Okay, let's talk about Unit E6, Jeb. That's the Standing Rock unit. We've had that for a couple of years. How did that go this last fall?
Went good. So the first year we started with 7 licenses. Last year we were at 14 licenses, and we're going to stay put at 14 licenses this year. Still some good things going on down there with with the department's interaction with private landowners, with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and still a good situation, a good opportunity for people for having extra elk opportunity in North Dakota, although it's a small one, and we don't ever envision it being, much larger, much more opportunities than maybe what there are now, although that, there's room for a little bit more, but it's a smaller area as far as what that habitat can actually hold with elk numbers, but still seeing good elk numbers in that area with our surveys, and yeah, just trying to put together a good partnership here over these last number of years, which we think we have, but it's something that we continue to need to learn more about as we move on too.
Okay, let's move on to moose.
Moose, yeah. So we're setting another record year with moose as far as licenses. Last year we issued a record number of moose licenses in the North Dakota since the season began in 1977. And this year we're issuing another record number of licenses at 479 licenses. The last couple of years we've really been concentrating on units M9, M10, and M11. And that's really where the increases have come from, of those areas where we've seen a growing moose population to the point of where we're actually trying to cut into that population, and have been for the last couple of years. But moose just continue to respond really well up there as far as high production rates, good recruitment rates, and so something it's been hard for the department to kind of catch. And so we're continuing to try to do that as far as trying to work with the landowner tolerance a little bit in some of those areas, which we feel in some areas we've probably exceeded.
Okay, there are still 2 units that are closed?
Correct. 2 units that are closed. Some of the more traditional units in North Dakota where moose were once doing really well and not so much. And then we have other parts of the state that moose are doing exceptionally well that haven't normally been in that part of the state. So, yeah, definitely some changes over the number of years with moose for sure.
These are a once-in-a-lifetime licenses. So is there any way to better your odds of getting drawn?
Absolutely is. And I know that myself included, people would love to have a bull elk, a bull moose license, no doubt about that, but your odds of drawing those are slim. But your odds go up considerably if you're willing to put in for an antlerless license, both for moose and elk. And there have been a lot of people that have realized that over the years and take advantage of that and end up drawing a license fairly quick. So you're still able to utilize that unique opportunity by hunting for an elk or moose in North Dakota, just maybe without the antlers.
Right. Any regulation changes for moose or elk this year?
The big change we have for elk and moose this year relates to our chronic wasting disease proclamation. And one of the ways that we look at trying to reduce the spread of chronic wasting disease is by transportation purposes, is by trying to limit the transportation of that carcass out of CWD areas. So in Unit E6, which is for folks that are familiar with that area, with 3F2, that's been in place for a long time, as far as removing that animal out of that unit is not allowed. And that's also not allowed for elk, just because elk are a cervid, of course, and CWD can spread to elk as well. Now in the northwest part of the state, with the recent discovery of CWD in that area, again, the department's trying to be responsible and managing for this disease and trying to reduce that spread. And so folks will, when they apply for units M10 or elk unit E6, there will be notification that pops up on there letting them know about those restrictions and making sure they're comfortable with them, so we don't have to have those discussions in the fall when they do actually have a license in hand. We want people to be able to be familiar with that up front and know what those restrictions are when it comes to transportation, which basically is we want that head and we want the spinal column left in that unit. You can bring the meat out as far as whether it's boned out, whether it's quartered out, those different types of things, but the head and the spinal column needs to stay in those particular units.
Okay, let's move on to bighorn sheep, Jeb.
Bighorn sheep, so as we've been doing for the last couple of years, the application process is the same. People apply during this time of year. We just don't have the final numbers determined yet. That's determined in the month of August. And then once we have those final numbers determined, which is right around the end of August, we quickly hold that lottery, contact those individuals with the number of licenses available. But it just puts us in a better situation to know exactly what the department is comfortable with as far as issuing those bighorn sheep licenses after the summer, early fall survey takes place, to where we have that accurate number versus issuing it beforehand, where then we tend to maybe be a little more on the conservative side. And by doing a more delayed, we can actually, there's been a couple years now where we feel we've probably been able to give a few more opportunities, a few more licenses because of that timing. So we think it's a good thing.
You still have to apply at the same time for bighorn sheep as you do elk and moose.
That's correct. The application time frame is exactly the same as elk and moose, and to what it always was. It's just that the determination of licenses is not known yet. We put a range of licenses in our proclamation, and then we determine that in August and get a hold of folks, hold the lottery, get a hold of folks at the very end of August, beginning part of September.
And one thing people should keep in mind is there is no refund if there is no season.
That's correct, and that's something with bighorn sheep. We've dealt with some disease issues, things like that in the past, where it's another reason we maybe wanted that delayed approach as well, just to make sure that we're not issuing somebody a license and then they're sent out in the field and there's not very many bighorn sheep left, or there's some diseased sheep out there that somebody doesn't have very good experience with. And so yeah, it's one of those things that it gives us a better opportunity to just evaluate that situation.
A lot of good information, Jeb. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like Jeb just mentioned, the moose, elk, and bighorn sheep application deadline is Wednesday, March 27th. You can apply by going to the Game and Fish website at gf.nd.gov or by calling 800-406-6409. For Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.